Joining us today is Jefferson Morley, who's the author of many books on the JFK assassination. You've been investigating it for many decades. How long?
30 years.
So 30 years at this point. You have a new piece out, and let's put this up on the screen. This is at his Substack, JFK Facts, which everybody should subscribe to. One thing that Jefferson is known for is almost never relying on anonymous sources. Everything is document-based and people who are willing to put their name to something.
Right.
This latest story is significantly based on an anonymous source, which to me signals how important you think it is.
That's true.
That you're willing to go forward on it. So tell us what this source told you and why this is in advance on what we understand, or at least adds new questions to what we understand about the assassination.
This source approached me a few years ago and said in the course of working at the CIA, had seen a document that disturbed them. And so we talked about that. I investigated a little bit, found a lot to corroborate that. I also checked out the source professional expertise, experience, and I felt very confident. This source is highly credible. And I wouldn't, like you say, I rarely use unnamed sources. But in this case, I felt if the source was willing to take a chance of disclosing classified information, then I could take a chance on the source.
Right. Do you feel like that this source will ever come forward? Like, we're going to learn who this is at some point?
I think the sources will be willing to do that.
All right, so let's talk about what they told you, though.
What did they show you?
The source said two really significant things. One, that there was a file room in a CIA office in Herndon, Virginia, where the CIA keeps its assassination-related records. Now, that doesn't mean that those are all secret records. Those may be records that have been shared with the Congress. We don't know. But that there is a dedicated facility like that. And I did some reporting, talked to people who have worked in that building, one of whom confirmed to me that there was a JFK facility within a SCIF, a secure compartmentalized intelligence facility. And so I felt good about that. The second thing that the source said was that in the course of duties at the CIA, the source had seen a document about the CIA's reaction to the congressional investigation of the 1970s. And the source felt that this document, lengthy document, 40, 50 pages, apparently produced by the CIA Inspector General's office, showed an intent to deceive the congressional investigators. The source says this document shows that they knew they weren't being totally forthcoming, and when Congress didn't penetrate their deception, they celebrated. Now, there's no document like that that's been released in the past 30 years with all the JFK releases under Trump and Biden. There's no document that fits that description in the remaining 3,500 JFK documents that still contain redactions. So this document is not in the JFK collection. Obviously, it should be. One of the important things about the story, and this also made me feel good, was when I asked the CIA for comment, they did not deny any of the facts in the story. In fact, they said something slightly disturbing. If you parse their statement carefully, what they're saying is, we're under no obligation to release this document, and if we want to keep it public, we will.
Got it. And so one of the things you talk about in the story is about Oswald in Mexico.
Yes, and that's the core of what he's talking about. The source says that the House Select Committee was called in and showed a bunch of documents about the CIA surveillance of Oswald in Mexico City shortly before the assassination of President Kennedy.
Right.
The CIA has always said, we never obtained any photographs of Oswald in Mexico City. The source says one of the things that he saw in the JFK file room was what looked like a video case that was labeled Oswald in Mexico and dated 1963. Now, if there is photography of Oswald in Mexico City in the possession of the CIA today, that alone will rewrite the JFK story, because they have been so adamant about denying this over the years. And what you see, the larger point of the story here is that what you see is this fits a pattern of withholding information, closely held information that the CIA had about Lee Harvey Oswald before the assassination. And that's what's really going on here is they are withholding JFK documents to this day. And the source's story makes that story, makes that clear. And the fact that the CIA is not denying it, not saying that, doesn't say the document doesn't exist, doesn't say the facility doesn't exist, we're on to something. So this is really about, why does it matter today? Well, this is about accountability, It's about transparency. We've had these assassination attempts on President Trump, lots of conspiracy theories, politicization of that. Obviously, we need transparency, we need credible investigations around that. And the same goes for President Kennedy. This is a story that doesn't go away in American politics. We're still talking about it 60 years later because of its symbolic importance and because, we have this mistrust of government. Government institutions aren't legitimate. And if you look in the broad sweep of history, when did U.S. government begin to lose its credibility? It was right around 1964, according to the polls, around the Warren Commission report of 1964. Since then, that report, not particularly credible with the American people, confidence in government has been going down.
One of the theories that says, actually there's a theory that says there was no conspiracy to assassinate Kennedy. And in fact, what we're looking at when it comes to the CIA is CYA, that they actually are just covering for their own incompetence and then it snowballs into covering for their cover-up.
Right.
And does this fit that, or does this fit the other?
I think that this points more to complicity because of numerous false statements and the way CIA operations are structured. This looks like a CIA operation, not CIA incompetence. But the available evidence, I have good friends who argue the other way, like you're saying, this is just, they screwed up and they're just covering their asses. Well, that's why we have the JFK Records Act. The JFK Records Act of 1992 says the government has to release all JFK records in its possession. They have to review them and release them. They have a presumption of immediate disclosure, according to the law. So if the CYA explanation is right, that doesn't mean that they don't have to disclose these records. They do have to disclose them. And if that's the case, then they should quell conspiracy theories and conspiracy theorizing and say, we screwed up and here's how we did it. But to say we're innocent and we're not going to share all the records with you, that's not credible.
And so, in that, let's take people back if they're not all that familiar about Oswald's time in Mexico and the meetings that he allegedly was having there and how that would fit into a conspiracy explanation. Why is that significant, Oswald's time in Mexico?
So Oswald, the accused assassin who denied...
We wrote a book,
He said he was a patsy.
We can put this up, Our Man in Mexico.
Yeah, so the story that I tell in Our Man in Mexico is Lee Harvey Oswald, the man who will be accused of killing the president and who will deny it and then be killed in police custody, goes to Mexico City 6 weeks before the assassination and visits the Cuban consulate and the Soviet embassy seeking to get a visa to travel to Cuba. The visa request is rejected. He's told he has to go get that in Washington. And so Oswald returns to the United States. What the CIA told the Warren Commission was, we didn't know anything about this guy. We knew so little about him, we didn't even get a picture of him, a surveillance picture of him. As I report in Our Man in Mexico, the station chief in Mexico City, Wynn Scott, said specifically that was not true. He had a very sophisticated surveillance system around both of those. Unlike the CIA's statement that the cameras weren't working that day, false. Investigators established that they were working. And the CIA insists on this, well, we never took his picture. So, in fact, they knew a whole lot about him. Senior CIA officials are looking at Oswald's files 6 weeks before the assassination, writing cables about him, thinking about him, and, by the way, not calling any attention to him, despite the fact that he had been arrested for fighting with CIA-funded group that summer. He had a Russian wife. When he defected to the Soviet Union, he offered military secrets. And now he's visiting Soviet and Cuban diplomatic compound, where everybody in those working those compounds was presumed to be an intelligence agent. And most of them in those were, just like a lot of people in the U.S. Embassy were spies.
Of course, yeah.
And so, so the notion that they didn't get his picture was, was never particularly credible. So what's going on here? Did they just miss him? Well, that would be the CYA. We didn't understand who he was. He went on and shot the president. Sorry, Mrs. Kennedy, we just screwed up. What's hard to understand from our point of view today is, the man who supposedly killed the president was well known to top CIA officials. Imagine if one of these accused assassins with President Trump was well known to a small group of top CIA officials. Would we say that's relevant to the story?
Yeah.
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
The CIA hid all of that. And all of those people who watched Oswald for 4 years as he made his way to Dealey Plaza, none of them lost their job. None of them even got so much as a demerit. Mostly because nobody knew. Over the last 60 years, the story has come out in bits and pieces. And my story now is just the latest part of, we're getting behind that curtain of official secrecy that has always surrounded Oswald and Cuba operations. And when we go through that curtain, we see, oh, there's still more classified stuff behind it.
Yeah.
And that's what's going on today is the CIA saying, we really don't have to obey that law, that law that says all JFK records. We don't really have to obey that. And, the CIA in the constellation of American power, a very strong institution. On JFK records, they got what they wanted, exactly what they wanted, from two very different presidents. From Trump, who said all the JFK records were released in 2017. Wasn't true. He had cut a deal with Mike Pompeo and the CIA, and lots of records remained secret. And Biden, more expectedly, an institutionalist, said, CIA, good guys, they can handle it from here on out. I wash my hands of the matter. So that's where it is right now. Trump's made a little bit of an issue of it, saying he would release the JFK files when RFK endorsed him. Trump had a chance to do it in 2017. He didn't. So it remains to be seen if he's elected, would he do?
Okay, question of why. We always talk about this. All the people involved are dead, presumably. So why do they still care so much about keeping this secret?
Because symbolically, it's really important. And this is why they can't even back up an inch. Because if they said, we screwed up, people get called up to Capitol Hill. They'd ask the director, what's going on here? How did this happen? How come you didn't tell us about this? They might get their budget cut. So yes, all the people involved are dead. And maybe the CIA could say, that was then, this is now. But I think the path of least resistance, and when you have the power of official secrecy, we're just going to bury that. Move along, folks. And this is what the CIA does. Presidents come and go, journalists come and go. The CIA is always there. And so I think they're thinking, well, we can just wait this thing out.
No, that's all I got. I mean, I guess last thing, if you have a minute. People also point to this police officer who claims that he accidentally squeezed the trigger. I'm sure you've seen this one. What do you think? What do you make of this?
This is the most persistent hoax in the JFK story. The Secret Service man did it.
You're gonna see people in the comment section probably talk about this. So tell us about this.
Sure.
The claim is that the Secret Service man panicked and turning around accidentally shot the president. The only problem with this theory is there's no eyewitness evidence to support it. There's no forensic evidence to support it. There's no photographic evidence to support it. And the author who first offered this, when facing legal action from one of the Secret Service officers involved, formally retracted the whole thing. So there's no evidence, and it's been renounced by the person who offered it. So chances are there's nothing to it.
Right. Okay.
But I want to say one last thing is, people ask, why does it matter today? What did what was the political meaning of Kennedy's assassination? And I think it's this. This is more my opinion. You can draw your, the facts are the facts. After Kennedy, the most warlike faction in the US government always had the upper hand. And Kennedy was steering us away from that, trying to end the Cold War, not going to war in Cuba, pulling out slowly in Vietnam. There's debates about all of those things. But the big picture that Kennedy articulates in the summer of '63, we don't want a Pax Americana, he says. Imagine that. Imagine if there was a Democratic candidate or a Republican candidate who said, we don't want a Pax Americana. We are in a Pax Americana era right now. We are establishing Pax Americana in Ukraine, Gaza. You know, we are trying to maintain that. There is another way, and the other way died with Kennedy.
Yeah, and whether the key thing to me is whether or not the CIA actually assassinated him. Every president since Kennedy, including LBJ, believed that they did.
Yeah, and operated accordingly.
And operated accordingly.
And this, and this is super important, where there's this discourse that tries to marginalize, you know, conspiracy theorists. Harry Truman, Lyndon Johnson, and Richard Nixon had their foibles, had their problems. They were not conspiracy theorists. These were men of power who understood how American power worked, and none of them believed the CIA's story of a quote unquote.
Yeah, they were terrified of them. They were terrified of them in the FBI. That's right, and it governed a lot of their decision making. Highly recommend people subscribe to.
And it's why Trump did not release the documents.
Most likely, yeah, seriously. Yeah, there you go. Subscribe to the Substack, buy the books. Appreciate you joining us, sir. Thank you.
Thanks a million, guys.
Absolutely. We'll see you guys later.
Hey, if you like that video, hit the like button or leave a comment below. It really helps get the show to more people.
And if you'd like to get the full show, ad-free, and in your inbox every morning, you can sign up at breakingpoints.com.
That's right. Get the full show, help support the future of independent media at breakingpoints.com.